The Memoirs of Roustam, Chapter 1, From a Slave Boy to Mamluk. He was born in Tiflis, Tbilisi, capital of Georgia, son of Master Roustam Honin, merchant, born on the ... 2 years later, his business was moved to Epirken, rather large town in Armenia, homeland of his father. 11 years later, he was walking in one of the properties of his father with several of his comrades who were attacked by several Tartars to carry them away to their country and assuredly to sell them. Several of his comrades were taken by these brigands and he escaped their hands. Roustam was lost on that day for 6 hours in the woods without being able to find the way to return to his mother, who he loved dearly. At that time, he met a woodcutter in the wood who was willing to take him to be with his mother, who was mortally worried, and he ensured that woodcutter to receive a handsome reward from his mother. The family of Master Roustam Honin numbered 2 girls and 4 boys. Roustam was the youngest. His father went on a journey with his 2 sons for his business to Ganja, in the province of Malik Majaloon. A few months later, the emperor of the Persians declared war against Ibrahim Khan, who was governor in the province of Armenia. Here is how Roustam lost all his family. From that moment, for important business, my father wanted to leave Ganja and to take with him my 2 brothers, Avak and Sirin, and me. But I was too attached to my mother to leave her. A few days later, he bought a carriage for his journey. The same day, we were at dinner, and he asked us if we were happy to go on this journey. My brother said yes, they were, but I said to him no. He questioned me a great deal about why I did not want to follow him. I said to him, when I was little, Mother took good care of me. She always made me happy. As I am beginning now to grow up, I want to go where she is and to make her happy if I can. He was greatly annoyed that I wanted to leave him. In the end, he was not able to win me over to take me with him. He was obliged to depart with my 2 brothers, and he left me all alone in the town of Ganja, without relatives and without money. Ganja is a very good town and extremely rich. It is where they do the greatest trade in silk in Kashmir from Persia. 3 months later, Ibrahim Khan declared war against Malik Majaloon, where I found myself in the fortress of Ganja. The people of the town were forced to go back into the fortress. I stayed until the last moment without being able to go out of the fortress. People went in without problem, but they were not allowed to leave. One day, when the mules of Malik Majaloon went out to look for provisions, I squeezed myself between the legs of the mules, and I went out by the stroke of luck in this manner without any danger. When I was outside the gate, I met 2 men from my land and the same town. I asked them if I could find the opportunity to get myself back to where my mother was. They said to me, yes, I know several people who intend to leave at 2 o'clock in the morning for Epirken, which was where I had left my poor mother and my 2 sisters, Marianne and Bigzada. Those 2 good gentlemen showed me the house where the travelers were. I got myself there without delay. They welcomed me very well. And so, all was decreed to depart at 2 o'clock in the morning. While waiting for nightfall, I was in a garden at the side of town looking for some vegetables for my food because I had had nothing to eat for several days. I spotted in the distance a flock of sheep. I made my way over to them to ask for a little milk or cheese, and so I went up to the shepherd. He said to me, what do you want? What do I want? A little milk or cheese, because for several days I have now eaten nothing. He questioned me a great deal while asking me the name of my land and that of my parents. I told him my name and that of my father. After that, he took me in his arms and kissed me heartily, saying to me, I am your uncle. It has been 15 years now since I left our land. I found myself at that moment very happy to have found a protector. And so I asked him for some provisions for my journey that I had to start at 2 o'clock in the morning. He gave me 2 big loaves of bread and a quantity of roast meat. I put all this in a sack to go back to the house where my traveling companions were. My uncle asked me if I wanted to stay with him until I was older, and I would then go to join my mother. I said to him, no, thank you. I have left my father and brothers to go back to my mother. So you see that I cannot stay with you. I am certain my mother's very worried about me, especially because I was the child she spoiled much more than the others. He saw greatly that I wanted not to stay with him. He embraced me. I wished him my farewells, and I went back without delay to the travelers' rendezvous, happy in my heart, hoping to see my mother a few days later. And so we left at the appointed hour. At daybreak, we were on the high mountain of Ganja. We saw at the foot of the mountain all Ibrahim Khan's army, which was marching on Ganja. After a march of 10 days on foot, we arrived in Aberkan, our town, where I had left my mother and my 2 sisters, but I found no one in our house. Felt great sorrow again, but I found in the town a peasant who had still stayed because everything had been razed, and all the houses were completely ruined. The peasant said to me, "Your mother and your 2 sisters left 2 months ago for the fort of Shusha." The day was almost over. I decided that I would sleep at our house, which was all ransacked by the army. I could not even find a little straw to sleep on there. The following day I departed. In the early morning I left my traveling companions in the town to their poor house, which had no more value like all the others. Between our town and Shusha, there was a small river which I had forded across several times without any danger, but that day there had fallen a great deal of water. I came down all alone to the river. It appeared a little rough to me, but I had a great desire to see my mother and sisters, which gave me the courage to boldly cross this little torrent. At that moment, I entered the water. The current picked me up and knocked me against a large rock, which I held tight for an hour without losing my consciousness. I saw a traveler coming up with his horse who had the goodness to save my life and to cross me to the other bank. I felt myself fortunate once more. I arrived at 6 o'clock in the evening in Shusha in the quarter of the Armenians, where I found several people who knew my mother, who received me very well, saying to me, "Your mother has told everyone my son will never abandon me. Sooner or later, he will come to find me. I know his good heart and his affection for me." And so they led me to where my mother was. At the moment when she saw me, she fainted for an hour without being able to speak a word to me. Her consciousness commenced. She saw me. She hugged me against her heart, shedding tears with my sisters, while heaping me with caresses. Mother said to me, "Yes, I was extremely sure that you would never leave me, though you were young and extremely far from here, and in the power of your father, who abandoned me perhaps forever." So there I was, quite settled with my mother in the fort of Shusha. I was beginning to grow strong and big. I wanted to take up service to earn something to relieve the living of my mother and my sisters, but my poor and loving mother never wanted, saying to me, "I would rather sell all my possessions in order to give you a living. I do not want to see you in servitude." And so I stayed at the house while receiving the most loving caresses from morning till night. One morning later, peace was made. Everything was extremely calm. I wanted to leave the fort of Shusha to go to Aberkan, our town. My mother consented. On my recommendation, I fetched a carriage. We loaded up all of our possessions, and we departed in the morning and arrived that evening at 6 o'clock. Our home had completely collapsed in, as I saw on returning from Ganja. We fixed the house up as we were able. Some days later, my young sister Bigzada unfortunately fell extremely ill because we had the misfortune to lose her after 8 days' time, which gave us much sorrow. She was one of the prettiest girls in Georgia. We had been deprived of news of my father for a year. This caused great upset for my mother, deprived of her husband and her 2 sons for such a long time. Mother received some time later a letter from my father through a merchant from Kazakh. My poor mother was the happiest of women to receive news from her husband and her children. He said in his letter that he had established a large shop in Kazakh and we would be able to go to join. My mother absolutely wanted to go join her husband and children. I said to her, "Mother, if you wish to, believe me, you shall not go on this long journey. If my father had good intentions to make you happy, he would have left you not such a long time without giving you news of him. I believe, too, if we make this journey, it will be our last misfortune because the roads are not certain for travelers. The Tartars even have stopped the travelers several times. This gives me much worry." Mother did not want to listen to me, saying to me, "I'm not making this trip for your father, if you will, but it's for my children who have been with him for so long." And so I was obliged to concede to go with her and my sister. Our road was through Ganja. As I knew the road, we sold a large part of our effects, and I led my mother and sister up to Ganja. After 2 days' march, my mother was very tired with the journey. I led mother and my sister to the market square of the town. as I knew the town very well. I received money from my mother to go and buy something for our dinner, and she was still waiting for my return. But it was at that moment that I had the misfortune to lose my mother and sister forever, because I had a bad foreboding when we left our unhappy town, which we loved, and where we were without worry. On returning from the market to join my mother, who was waiting for me an hour, I met a gentleman who accosted me saying, "Ah, there you are, Roustam. I've been looking for you for an hour. Your mother's at my house, is waiting for you." Unfortunately, this was not true, and so I went with this man without knowing him. When we arrived at his home, I did not see my mother. I began to cry like the unfortunate that I was. He said to me, the master of the house, "There's nothing to fear. Your mother's gone out with your sister. I'm going to look for them." During that interval, I was sitting in the middle of the courtyard in the shade of the trees, waiting for my mother, who always made me truly happy. There came into the house a young man to say to two ladies who were sitting near me. He looked at me a great deal while asking me if I spoke Armenian. I said to him I was Armenian too. He said to me in that language, "Try to escape from here, because they have brought you here to sell you and to lose you forever. Perhaps you will never more see your mother and sister." I realized this as if having received a hammer blow on my poor head. So then the man departed. I stayed with these two evil women. I did not know how to escape from that house. There arrived a moment later a woman from the neighborhood. They all began to argue in their language, which I understood very well, and I spoke as they did. I seized that lucky moment. I took the key to the outhouse. They believed that I truly needed it. Besides, the guardrobe was a door which gave onto a small courtyard, but the courtyard was cut by a stream 2 feet in depth, and so the moment I was by the door to the little court, I went in and closed the door after me and crossed the little stream, and I found myself out of danger and escaped from the hands of those brigands. I made my way without delay to the spot where I had left my mother and my sister, but unfortunately I found nothing. I asked everyone who passed me by. No one paid any attention to my unhappy fate. However, while crossing over a bridge, I met an old friend of my father, who I knew very well too. I told him all our troubles as we made our way. He said to me, "Fear nothing. I shall find your mother, and I shall get the man who stole you punished." He took me to his house and fed me well, and took me with him to the market where I had lost my mother. He showed me everyone who passed, and he would ask me in a low voice, "Is it him?" I would say to him, "No, that is not him. That is not him. If you wish, I will take you to his house. It is not far from here." He said to me, "No, that is not necessary. I will know how to find him." He took me then into a great house. "Stay here. I'm going to look for your mother." I was quite willing, but the brigand did not come. I wept from that morning till night. The next day, the mistress of the house said to me, "That gentleman who brought you will not come again. You must not count on him." I say to her, "Oh, well, I am going to go to his house. I know his residence." She locked the main door to prevent me from leaving. Well, there I was in an inconsolable state. To console me, she said to me, "I have no child. My intention is to adopt you as my son." I kept on weeping without agreeing to her offer. The barbarian who had brought me to this house had sold me for the second time. The first time had failed because I had escaped, as I have just shown. It appears that my mother knew that I was in that great house, because she came several times with my sister to the door to ask for me. But they always refused to let her in, saying, "There are no children in this house." She still came back, weeping a torrent of tears. As I no longer had any means of getting out of that house, I was obliged to agree to being the adoptive son of the mistress of the house, believing to be freer, to escape more easily, and to get myself entirely back to my homeland. Perhaps I would have been able to find my mother through the merchants who traveled from one land to another. I said to the mistress, "I would like to be your adoptive son on condition that you find my mother. We will go, both of us, to search in the town." She says to me, "Yes, fear not, I shall take care of it." And so there was a ceremony carried out. According to the custom of the land, she put me in a shirt. She embraced me while saying to me, "So there you are, my son. I will make you happy." Despite all this, I did not hold any trust in her. I said to myself, "So here I am again, sold for the third time." I was not mistaken in my thought. I stayed nearly 2 months with her. She had given me nice clothes, a good bed, and very well fed, but I was still mistrustful of all her good intentions. I asked several times to just go outside the front door. She would say to me, no, tomorrow we will go out together." It was always the same thing. And so I was never able to make my escape. During all that interval, there came visits during the day from my adoptive mother. She would not let me be seen by anyone. When she heard a knocking at the door, she hid me in the little rooms. Sometimes she hid with me. I said to her, "But why are we hiding? We're not criminals." She said to me, "Oh, of course not. It is not because of this. I do not wish to receive a lot of people. I want to stay with my son." She let me see only the tailor who made my clothes. A few days later, the husband of this bourgeois woman said to me, "We are going to go on a journey in a few days along the coast of the Caspian Sea. You shall come with me." I said to him, "Yes," thinking I would be able to escape along the way. Unfortunately, I was not able to succeed in my wish. One day, extremely early at midnight, the servant came up to my room. He said to me that I had to get dressed because we were going to depart from the Caspian. An half hour later, I went down to the bedroom of my adopted mother. I made my farewells to her. She said to me, "Fear not, you will come in a fortnight with my husband." I was counting on completely escaping once outside the house and not to go any further. They opened a small door giving onto a courtyard. The first thing that I saw was 30 riding horses saddled and bridled. They opened another door to a sort of riding ring which held in it 60 little children, all very well dressed. At this sight, I said to myself, "So here I am again, sold for the 4th time." And so they mounted us, 2 to each horse, and so there we were, starting out for our destination, escorted by several armed men. 2 days after that, we encountered a large number of Tartars who stopped us in order to take us away. All the armed men were defeated within a half hour, and they surrounded us on condition that all the Armenians would be in the power of the Tartars, and all the Georgians would stay with my villainous brigand of an adoptive father, who was not so pleased to have lost 15 of his best little children. And I stayed with him too as a Georgian. 3 days later, we arrived in a large town right at the foot of the Mount Caucasus. I stayed there for some time. All the others had been sold in very little time. For several days, I lost sight of the pig who had brought me into this town. It seemed to me that he had sold me again for the 5th time. I was at the house of a good man who treated me well. I was even very free. I went out walking every day by myself. I had a great desire to escape, but I could not because I had the great Kura River to cross. I had no money to help me to escape and cross the river. I stayed there, therefore, for 3 months in the winter, always crying over being separated from my loving mother, who made me happy. I knew well that I would not stay for a long time where I was. The man to whom I belonged was a grand silk merchant who sometimes traveled to Crimea. He gave me one day a pair of fur-lined boots, a very warm cloak, so that I could travel with him. We crossed the famous mountain of Caucasus with great difficulty. It was ordinarily very cold. The bourgeois merchant had carried 2 blankets with him, which served us well. They were not for covering us. They were to cover the great quantity of snow so we could walk on the blanket. When we walked on one, the other was put in front of us so that we would not sink into the snow and to make it easier to climb the mountains. After these bad crossings, we still had 2 more days' march to arrive at the capital of Mount Caucasus, which is called Legistan. The prince who governs that province is called Heraclius. The land, although very mountainous, is a good land. They do great trade in silk and in cashmere, as in Ganja. The sheep of that land are also very good, extremely large. A single one weighs 80 pounds, even more. It also has beautiful horses. The Tartars get their beautiful horses from that region, as do the Turks of Anapa. The merchant who I was with wanted to go to Tartary as soon as possible, but a malady befell me. He was obliged to delay his journey until I was recovered, but that lasted almost 2 months. It was a malady which made me suffer greatly. One time when I went for a walk in the mountains, on my return to the house, I was extremely cold. I went over by the fire to cross my legs and, seated on the ground like everyone, there was a great cauldron on the fire filled with water which is boiling. Someone poked the fire, and then there was the cauldron tipped over my 2 legs. I suffered like someone very unfortunate. My legs swelled like a barrel. 2 months later, I was completely healed of that accident. And so we departed for Alexandria, the town of Tartary, Dagestan, and 3 days later we arrived in that town. A few days after our arrival, I asked the merchant who I belonged to for permission to go for a walk, and I received his permission. The moment I got outside the door, I met a young girl of my own age, 13 years, a native of both my land and the same town. She had been taken by the Tartars 2 months before me. And so I hastened to give her news of her parents. She said to me, "Your sister Marie is here if you want. I can take you to her master's place." I could have asked for nothing better than to go there to share all my misfortunes with her, and so she took me to his door. I went to the house to ask for my sister. She saw me. She threw her arms around me. She had more courage than I did because I was crying so hard that I could not talk to her. To ask news of my poor mother, whom I had left in Ganja. She consoled me as best as she was able, telling me that mother was a slave at an Armenian's house, who was well established in the town as a grand merchant. And he had bought mother and given her freedom, telling her that she could go to her own land if she wanted. Mother, being alone, was not able to go on the journey. And she was living in that house as a friend until the roads were free for her to return to her land. I was very happy to learn that my mother was not far from me, because from Alexandria to Kislear, it was only 20 leagues. I asked the trader who I belonged to for permission to go and see my mother. He never wished to give it. After that, I made several approaches to merchants from my land so that they would buy me and keep me until we could write to my father to come and get us. But unfortunately, no one wanted to do that service for us, saying to me, "They want to sell you for too high a price. Otherwise, I would buy you." I was desolate and not being able to embrace my poor mother again for the last time, because I departed for Constantinople some days later in Kislear with a trader of little children who came from Constantinople, who bought me. For the 6th time since I had left my land, I beseeched my new trader to buy my sister so that she could come with me to Constantinople, so that we could tell each other our misfortunes. He did not wish to either, and so I was completely desolate. I wept from morning till night. My poor sister, she caressed me lovingly, saying to me, "Give me a lock of your hair. I will have it sent to our good mother," so she would be assured that I was alive. I was caressed a lot for a fortnight. She took the scissors and cut off a great quantity of my hair, while shedding torrents of tears over my head, saying, "My dear Roustam, whatever land you go to, you must not neglect to write to me. You can see clearly that we have no other consolation than to cherish you, and think night and day of you. If Papa comes here to this land, we shall send him to Constantinople to look for you." And she took the address of the trader who I belonged to, residing in Constantinople, to give to my father. She promised to write to me. But ever since that date, I have received not a single letter from my parents, nor news of them. I did not know the date of our departure from Kislear, and my poor sister did not know either, but we left some days later by sea for Anapa. It is the foremost seaport and frontier of Turkey. After 3 days of travel, crossing the frontier of Turkey and Mingrelia, we arrived at a great mountain, half a league from the town of Anapa. When I saw the Black Sea for the first time, I wept a great deal, saying, "I am going to sail across that great sea. I am going to be deprived forever of my unfortunate family and of my homeland." I saw the merchant ships in the harbor, which were waiting for us, and so we reached the town that evening. The next day, we embarked for Constantinople. After 2 days at sea, I arrived at the Dardanelles Passage. Later, we had to wait several days at the entrance to the Dardanelles. After that, they let us pass on to Constantinople. I was lodged next to St. Sophia. It is the grandest and richest of all the cathedrals in the universe. This cathedral was built by the Armenians, but the Turks took it for themselves. I stayed for 6 months in Constantinople. There then arrived from Egypt in Constantinople a trader belonging to Salah Bey to buy me. It was the last and the 7th time that I had been sold since my misfortune. A few days later, I was put on a merchant vessel in the Dardanelles Passage, and we set sail for Alexandria, the main seaport of Egypt. After crossing of 8 days, we arrived in Alexandria. We were left in the city for 2 days so we could rest. After that, we were put in a small boats, which they call caiques, to go from Alexandria to Great Cairo, where Salah Bey was. We went through the very dangerous passage where the Nile flows back into the Black Sea, where the two rivers crash one against the other, the huge waves rising as high as houses. And so we passed through without harm. There's nothing so pretty as the voyage from Alexandria to Great Cairo. All along the Nile may be found planted sugarcane, date palm trees, and pomegranate trees. The same day we reached Rashid, halfway along the road to Cairo. The next day we were sent fine Arabian riding horses to bring us to Great Cairo. We were 12 young men destined for Salah Bey, and we all got on horseback and arrived that evening in Bulak, half a league from Cairo. And we dined there, and we were sent for at 11 o'clock in the evening to fetch us into the city. The following day we were presented to the Bey, who received us well. He questioned me a great deal in the Georgian language, of which I spoke little because I had left my land too young. He asked me in which land I was born, if I was from Tbilisi in Georgia. I said yes to him. I told him my father's name, which he knew very well because he himself was Georgian. He had traveled a great deal in Armenia. To be good Mamelukes, the Georgians and the Mingrelians were preferred. I do not know why. Because the Armenians are far more courageous than the other nations. At that date, I was 15 years old. After that, the Bey said to me, go and rest. Clothes will be made for you, and I will have a good horse given to you. I will take care of you as one of my compatriots, and I will give your parents news of you. I do not know if that was true, because I never received any news after I left my sister in Kizlyr in Tartary. I left the Bey to go to the room which had been assigned to me. Crossing a long corridor where I came across many Mamelukes, old and young, I recognized a young man of 15 years, my age. He was born in the same town where I was. He had been my comrade, but he had lost 2 years before me. Every day I had seen his mother and his father weeping for him. I went straight up to him. I asked him if he knew me. He said no to me. I said to him, but your name is Mangasar. You were born in Abercan. How can it be that you do not know me? I was your comrade. My name is Roustam. He said to me, by my faith, yes. He threw his arms around me. We renewed our friendship, and I gave him news of his parents. I was very happy to have found a comrade. We told our misfortunes to each other to distract ourselves a little. 6 days after my arrival, there came into my room a barber with a kashif, colonel of Salah Bey's, in order to baptize me according to the custom of the land. This was to perform circumcision on me. He explained to me the reason for it, saying to me, it is by order of Salah Bey, and in order to be good Mameluke, I need to be circumcised. And so here was the barber who began the ceremony despite my objections. 10 days later, I had recovered completely. A few days later, I received the horse that I had been promised on my arrival in Great Cairo. For 2 months, I did no other service but learning to ride a horse and learning to throw spears. After those 2 months, I traveled with the Mamluk Corps throughout the province of Egypt. After that last journey, I stayed in Great Cairo for 2 years without going on any journeys. All of Egypt was covered by 24 beys. Murad Bey was the first of them, then Ibrahim the second, the 24 beys. In each in his turn went on a journey to Mecca according to the custom of their religion. The turn of Salah Bey came. I went on the journey to Mecca with him. I also saw the tomb of Muhammad. On our return from Mecca, we got as far as 30 leagues from Cairo. Salah Bey learned that the French had entered Great Cairo. Murad Bey had fought a great battle at Giza, but through ill fortune had lost it. A large number of the Mamelukes had drowned, 1,000 of them, when swimming across with their horses. After that, Salah Bey decided to turn back to where Jezar Pasha was at Senjen Dakra, because he did not have enough forces to give battle. Jezar Pasha found it a great upset to not have given battle against the French before leaving the land. When we arrived in the town, Salah Bey paid a visit to Jezar Pasha immediately upon his entry into the town. While Salah Bey was in the salon with Jezar Pasha, an order was given to bring coffee. Poison was put in the coffee, and it was offered to our unfortunate Bey. He drank his coffee. A half hour later, he was dead. We were all desolate Because of this loss, Jezir Pasha wished to keep us with him, but no one wished to stay. There were many who escaped to go to their own lands, and others to Mecca, and I myself took my servant with me. I set off for Great Cairo because I had many people that I knew in the city, so I had nothing to fear. After leaving Saint Jean d'Acre, I removed my Mameluke uniform and put on one of my servants, and so I was dressed like him. I was forced to sell my horse and my weapons, and I gave a sum of money to my servant so he would not say anything to anyone when we arrived in Great Cairo. He gave me his word that he would always serve me and no one would know nothing. And I was not highly worried, and so we each took a donkey and traveled to Great Cairo. In this manner, we entered the city very easily because we were dressed like peasants. I saw every day in the city a great deal of French troops and handsome and veteran grenadiers with great mustaches who made up the garrison of the city, and the dragoons had occupied Bulak, a league from the city. I remained nearly 1 month in the city without staying in any house. I was afraid someone would point me out and that I would be jailed as a prisoner. I ate and I slept in the street with my servant who never left me. As a result of spending it, I had barely any money. I learned that the Sheikh el-Bakri had a high position in the civilian administration, that is to say, for religion. I knew this important individual well from Salah Bey's house. I would turn up at his house to seek a position, but his porter or servant would always refuse me at the door, saying to me, Sheikh el-Bakri sees no one today, and certainly audiences are not given to peasants. And so I was forced to tell them my name and to whom I had belonged before. After all this, the Sheikh had them tell me that he would see me tomorrow. I turned up at his house on the designated day. He received me well, saying to me, I will certainly take you to my service, and you shall ride with me. But the permission is needed of General Bonaparte, the general-in-chief. At that moment, I felt great fear that he would have me taken by the French, for I knew nothing yet of their manner of living and their religion. However, my servant went every day around the city, and he told me that the French are good people and are of the Christian religion. I began to feel a little less worried because I am Christian too, like them. Finally, Sheikh el-Bakri told me, go up to his seraglio, saying to him, stay there until I ask for the permission of the general-in-chief. So there I was, in the seraglio, with 5 women who belonged to the sheikh. They offered me a great deal of sorbets and filaires, that is to say pastries and lemonade, but I was heavy of heart. I accepted none of that. I was forced to be amongst these women with only a blue shirt on my body. I was forced to weep amongst those women. All those good people also wept at my fate while consoling me the best they could. The same day, Sheikh el-Bakri mounted his horse and went to see the general-in-chief and asked for permission to keep me with him. He gave him that permission, asking him if I was old enough and if I was a good subject. The sheikh replied to him, yes, I can vouch for him. He's a good subject. He's 15 and a half years of age. He belonged formerly to Salah Bey, who was poisoned by Jezir Pasha at Saint Jean d'Acre. After that, the general-in-chief said to him, if Murad Bey wishes to act with all reason, I shall give him permission to come with all his Mamelukes to Great Cairo. After several hours, I saw Sheikh el-Bakri arrive. He said to me, you are in my service. The general-in-chief has given me his permission, and he had his tailor come without delay to make me the uniform of a Mameluke, as I formerly was. All those good ladies, they sent for me to come to the seraglio at once. They embraced me and they congratulated me on remaining at the house, and they begged me to let me know what I needed. And they presented me with a number of handkerchiefs embroidered in gold and a pretty purse to put money in, likewise embroidered in gold. The one I found the prettiest was Sheikh el-Bakri's daughter, infatuatingly beautiful, aged 11 years and a half. I stayed in that house for nearly 3 months. During that interval, the sheikh had gathered into the city around 25 Mamluks who were solitary or hidden in houses. As I was the oldest and in the longest in service, he named me their chief and to teach them how to ride. It seemed to me that the ladies that I saw in the seraglio, who received me so well, highly urged Sheikh el-Bakri to marry his daughter to me, who I knew in the harem and was aged 12 years. And so all was agreed and settled for my marriage. Even General in Chief Bonaparte was informed of my marriage to the Sheikh's daughter. While I was with the Sheikh, I had earned not a bad amount of money. The Sheikh's el-Balad, that is to say the village heads, would come to the house extremely often. They brought their master the levies which they had to pay every year. The Sheikh el-Bakri presented a gift to each one of a cloak and a cashmere shawl. As for me, being chief of the Mamelukes, it was my duty to hand them the cloaks and the cashmeres. This brought me sometimes 300 or 400 francs, and these I always saved to send to my mother, but I never was able to find the opportunity. I rode out every day with the Sheikh, who dined extremely often with the General in Chief, and it was there that meetings concerning the city and the army were held. The General in Chief set off with a large part of his army to take Saint-Jean-d'Acre. On his arrival at the edge of the town, he mounted attacks several times upon it, right up to the last wall, and several grenadiers even penetrated into the town. But unfortunately, he was not able to succeed as a result of munitions. He returned to Great Cairo. After his arrival, at times he would dress in Turkish clothing, and he said that he would not return to France, that he would have himself circumcised according to the Turkish custom and make himself king of Egypt. Everyone was highly pleased with that. There was a great deal of confidence in him. But this was to better fool the Turks. 10 to 12 days later, we were given the news that a Turkish army was about to land at Abu Qir. The General-in-Chief departed without delay, with General Murat to command the army which occupied the province of Alexandria. During that interval, Sheikh el-Bakri took into his service a new Mameluke, much older than me. He was given the command of all the Mamelukes that the Sheikh had. It was he himself who had offered him that without warning me. He had been promised him his daughter in marriage, who was already agreed for me because everything had been prepared for this. Each day, I forbade the young Mamelukes to run around in the streets, even in the courtyard, by order of the Sheikh. One day, I was coming downstairs when here was the new Mameluke, who had come to make me go back up to my room, despite my objections, informing me that he was my chief, but I did not wish to obey him. I said to him, "Yes, I shall go up, but you are going to come up with me." In the house, I had 2 young Mamelukes who loved me like their brother. When we got to my room, I began by saying to them, "Who ordered you to order me about?" He said to me, "I am not accountable to you." And we began to quarrel. I leaped upon him to beat him up, but he was much bigger than me. But the 2 Mamelukes who I had with me both jumped up, and all 3 of us fell upon him, and we knocked him to the ground. I hit him so many times, his face was all swollen. He ended by going back downstairs, and I stayed there. At that moment, the Sheikh was in the seraglio, and I greatly feared that the Sheikh would have me flogged for having fought with my comrade. The 2 young Mamelukes said to me, "Fear not. We shall tell the Sheikh that it was the new Mameluke who wanted to order you about and to quarrel with Roustam, who did not deserve punishment." At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the Sheikh came down from the seraglio and went into his salon and ordered me to fetch coffee and his pipe, which I brought for him. All the Mamelukes came into the salon and stood to attention before the Sheikh el-Bakri, as is the custom of the land. And here was the Sheikh, who asked me where the new Mameluke was. I said to him, "He's below." I sent a Mameluke to look for him. He came into the salon. The Sheikh saw from his face that he'd been beaten up because his eyes and his face were swollen from the blows I had delivered him. Since I was the oldest, the Sheikh asked me why he was in such distress and who had beaten him up. I answered him, "It was me, because he was not prudent. He wished to go into the streets, and he wished to order me about." And there the Sheikh fell into a rage with me, telling me that I was a bad subject for having beaten up my comrade in this way, that if I enraged him too greatly, he would have me taken off by the French, and I deserved to be flogged on my heels and my feet. Really, I greatly feared all the threats that he was making against me. I asked him for permission to explain to him the reason why I had beaten up the new Mameluke. He said to me, "Yes, speak and tell me the truth. Otherwise, I shall punish you severely and make an example of you." I said to him, "Yes, I shall hide nothing from you. I shall tell you the truth. You are the one who has hidden everything from my regard. Up until now, you have appointed me to command the 25 Mamelukes who are in your service. I was even counting on being fortunate one day in marrying your daughter. You gave me your word on it. Even the general-in-chief was informed of this, and here at this moment I find myself ordered about by a new and bad Mameluke who you promised your daughter to him, without warning me to obey those who have an order to order me about, and I would never obey him without such orders. See, all the Mamelukes who are present here, you must ask them if I am mistaken, if I have failed in my duty. He said to me, very well, he is the one that I have appointed chief. This is my intention, and everyone will obey him. If you are not satisfied, I shall have you taken off by the French. I still feared that this pig would have me flogged. I said to him, I now know what your orders are. I swear to you I will obey him. Fortunately, everything ended well, without any flogging. I learned from a negress in the seraglio that El Bakri's chief wife was highly angry about all these changes, and his daughter was always weeping because her father had changed the marriage, which was intended to be made with me, but her father wanted Abraham. A few days later, I learned that the general-in-chief had fought a great battle near Abu Qir, and the Turks were prisoners or killed. General Murat had mounted an attack on the ship of the Pasha who commanded the Turkish army and had fought with him, and delivered him a cut with his saber, which cut off 2 fingers and took him prisoner. So the general-in-chief was back in Great Cairo, still saying that he was going to stay for good, and that he would appoint himself king of Egypt. Everyone had great confidence in him. On his arrival, he very often held great dinners for all the important personages of the city. To make the general happy, Sheikh El Bakri always drank wine from a silver goblet, so it could not be seen. He was so well accustomed to the wine that every day there were brought to him 2 bottles, one of wine and one of eau de vie. And he mixed them all together and drank them every evening and became drunk like a true drunkard every day of his life. I saw the same thing. One day, I accompanied the sheik to dinner at General Bonaparte's. Everyone was at the table. I went across to a little salon where I found Mr. Eugène and 2 other people at the table. They offered me a glass of champagne wine, saying to me, "Drink, it will not do you any harm. It is the best of France." I drank and found it was very good. They absolutely forced me to drink a second glass. After the dinner, I rode with the sheik back to the house. We only needed to cross the square. El Bakri had 25 Mamelukes. I felt an extraordinary gaiety due to the champagne wine. I was making my horse dance next to the sheik like a madman. Clearly, the sheik noticed my gaiety. When we arrived at the house, he told to come in private to speak with me. I went to the little salon where he drank every night and became drunk. He did not even have the strength to go up to the seraglio. He said to me, "Did you drink wine today at the general's?" I said to him, "No, I drank the best of France. It was Monsieur Eugène de Beauharnais who gave me 2 glasses." He told me that I was a drunkard. He threatened to have me flogged on my feet. But I did not lose my head. I said to him, "If you have the misfortune to punish me in that manner, I shall tell everyone that every day wine and eau de vie are brought to you, and that you become drunk every evening. And if you do not have me thrashed on my foot, I shall say nothing. I swear to you on my word of honor." It seemed to me that he feared the threats which I had made to him, and he finished by saying that he would pardon me this time, that if it happened to me again, he would have me punished. All this worked out for the best, but I was still discontented about the injustice that had been done to me. It seemed that the general-in-chief intended to depart for France. He sent a request through Mr. Elias, his interpreter, for 2 Mamelukes to be in his service. One day, Mr. Elias presented himself to the Sheikh El Bakri to take 2. The sheik gave him 2. Mr. Elias told me that if I wished, he would arrange for me to enter the general service, saying to me, "The French are good people, and they are all Christians." I said to him, "Yes, I do ask not for more, but you know very well that I am not happy with the sheik." I had told him all the injustices that had been done to me. So Mr. Elias departed with 2 Mamelukes, and he left me at the house, saying to me, "Have no worry. I shall keep you in mind. I was almost certain to be selected there because I had known him for a long time from Salabes. When Elias came for the general with 2 young Mamelukes, one of them, when he saw the general, he started weeping because he feared him. Although the general was not wicked, the general said to Elias, I do not want to keep people with me against their will. Here is a child who is crying, so you must take him back to the sheik, and you will demand another who has the will. Elias said to the general, if you wish to give me a letter for the sheik, perhaps we could have that big Mameluke who rides out with him every day. He is a good subject. He's a Georgian. The general gave him a letter for the sheik to have me in his service. That same day, I saw Monsieur Elias arrived with a letter for the sheik. Passing by me, he said to me, fear nothing, I've come to fetch you. And he went into the salon where the sheik was and handed him the general's letter, which was making the request for me. At that point, I was in my room intentionally, if I should be called for, and this did not fail. He came to tell me that the sheik was asking for me. I appeared before him. He was reading the letter. I intentionally said to him, I do not wish to go with the French. My desires always remain with you. He said to me, my friend, it cannot be. The general-in-chief is asking for you. If he wanted to ask even for my son, I could not refuse him. For my part, I was extremely happy to leave his house because I found myself unhappy at all the injustices that had been made to me on behalf of a new Mameluke who did not know how to do anything, not even ride a horse. I intentionally told the sheik that I did not wish to go with the French. I am much happier in your service. I will go only to please you. But later, will you arrange for me to leave the general's service? He said to me, yes, I shall not abandon you, and you shall come to see me every day. After that, I kissed his hand, after the custom of the land, and made my farewells to him. I ordered my servant, who was still with me, to saddle my horse, and I made my farewells to all my comrades. The 2 Mamelukes, who I regarded as my brothers, especially started weeping miserably on seeing the final moment of leaving me forever. Entered the service of General-in-Chief Bonaparte on the ... Monsieur Elias took me to the general, who received me in his salon. The first thing he did to me was to tug my ears. He asked me if I knew how to ride a horse, and I told him yes. He also asked me if I knew how to use a saber. I said to him, yes, I have even fought the Arabs with sabers on several occasions. I showed him the wound that I had received on my arm. He said to me, that is very good. What is your name? I said to him, Yaya. He said to me, but that is a Turkish name. What was the name you bore in Georgia? I said to him, my name is Roustam. I do not want you to bear a Turkish name. I want you to bear your name of Roustam. After going into his room, he brought me out a Damascened saber, on its hilt 6 big diamonds, and a pair of pistols garnished in gold. He said to me, take them. These are for you. I'm giving them to you, and I shall take care of you. He bade me enter a room filled with papers. He bade me carry them all into his study. That same day, I served his dinner at 8 o'clock in the evening. After dinner, he ordered his carriage to go on a promenade around the city. He called for Monsieur Lavigne, his piqueur, to provide me with a good Arabian horse and a beautiful Turkish saddle, and we went out for a promenade, with me positioned alongside his carriage door. That same evening, he said to me, here is my bedroom. I want you to sleep at my door, and you are not to let anyone in. I am counting on you. I said to him, through Mr. Elias, who was with me, I am happy to have his trust, and I would rather die than abandon my door and let anyone into the room. You can count on me. The next morning, I attended him as he dressed, along with his valet de chambre named Hébert. My intention was to have entered into service along with me 2 Mamelukes that I loved so, who had remained with the sheik, but unfortunately, we departed too hurriedly for France. Chapter 2. We were not informed that we were going to France. I learned that much later afterwards. Some days after I entered the general's service, the valet de chambre came at midnight to dress the general. He said to me, we are about to depart for Alexandria because a Turkish and English army is arriving. In this way, we departed hurriedly. I did not even have the time to go to seek my possessions, which I had left at Sheikh el-Bakri's. And what caused me greater distress was a poor servant who I was was not able to take with me. We left Great Cairo on the ... and arrived that evening at Menuf. The general dined there, and we departed the next morning for Alexandria as we were told to. Along the way, we encountered a great number of Arabs who barred our passage. I asked the general for permission to charge the Arabs with the guides who were the escort of the general. He said to me, "Yes, go and take care that the Arabs do not take you, because they will not treat you well." I had a truly good horse. I feared nothing, and I was well armed. I had with me 2 pairs of pistols, a saber, a blunderbuss, and a club on my saddle. After the charge, the general asked Monsieur Barbanegre, who led the charge, if I had acted well. He said to him, "Yes, he's a brave soldier. He wounded 2 Arabs." After that, the general presented me on the same day with a poignard d'honneur, which gave me the greatest pleasure. Since that time, it has never left me. We slept that night in the desert on the sand. The same evening, Monsieur Elias arrived from Great Cairo with dispatches for the general. At the same time, he brought me some pasteques, that is to say, watermelons, which did me a great deal of good because it was very hot indeed. And he said to me, "There is no Turkish nor English army, as they are saying at present. But you are going to go on another journey," without saying anything else to me, and then he was gone back to Great Cairo. The next day in the morning, we lost a little of our way because of the great quantity of sand. We saw several Arab women who were working the fields. The general told me that I should ask these women for the way. I galloped my horse over to ask these women for our way. When the women saw me, they took their shifts, which was their only clothing, and showed their derriere, indeed their body completely bare. We arrived at 10 o'clock in the evening between Alexandria and Aboukir on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea. Tents were put up and the order given for dinner to be served. I spotted 2 frigates in the harbor. I asked Monsieur Eugène, who was aide-de-camp to the general-in-chief, what those frigates were, who they belonged to. He told me that they belonged to the Turks. He was still keeping a secret from me because these were 2 French frigates which were waiting in the harbor for the general and his escort. But I did not know that till the evening. During that interview, it was so hot that I went to bathe in the seashore, and so it was there that I saw Mr. Fisher, the general's comptroller, who had come to find me. I arrived at the tent and I dined. After that, I saw everyone so happy, so merry. The soldiers were throwing their packs in the air, and the cavalrymen were leaving their horses to those who were still to remain in that land. I asked Monsieur Joubert, interpreter, a Frenchman, one of the general's interpreters, "What does it mean? I see everyone so happy." He said to me, "We are leaving for Paris. It is a beautiful land and a great city. The 2 frigates that we see from here, they are to take us to France." And I was told to leave my horse. I took only my small portmanteau containing 2 shirts and a cashmere shawl. In this way I set off with several officers a short quarter of a league from the tent to embark in the cutters to join the frigates. The sea was very rough, and the waves crashed over our heads. The cutters filled up with water, and everyone was sick during that short crossing. I myself was not sick at all. Quite the contrary. I kept asking to eat. The Mameluke named Ali was very sick too. We arrived very late in the evening at the frigate, and we departed without delay. Everyone was extremely happy. I spent the whole day without seeing the general. All those gentlemen, in order to infuriate me, told me that when I arrived in France, my head would be cut off, because when the Mamelukes captured French soldiers, they cut off their heads the same way. That gave me a little worry. 3 days after our embarkation, I asked to speak to the general through Monsieur Joubert, who spoke Arabic, and so he let me speak. On the same day, the general said to me, "There you are, Roustam. How are you feeling?" I said to him, "Very well, but very worried about my fate." He said to me, "But why is that?" I said to him, "Everyone says that when I arrive in France, my head will be cut off. If that is true, as they say, I would like this to be done right now, rather than I be made to suffer all the way to France." He said to me, with his usual kindness, still tugging my ears as always, "The ones who told you that are idiots. Fear not. We shall soon arrive in Paris, and we shall find lots of pretty women and lots of money. You shall see that we will be extremely happy. much more than in Egypt. After that, I thanked him a great deal for the manner in which he received me, and he gave me peace of mind because I was highly worried. To pass time more agreeably on the frigate, he played cards several times with Berthier, Duroc, Bessières, Lavalette, indeed a great deal of people. He won several times, gave me small sums of money. We arrived in Corsica, the general's land, having crossed along the coast of Barbary and Tunisia. When we spotted the coast of Corsica, the general sent the captain of the frigate in a cutter to notify the town's authorities and many of the town's belle dames to congratulate the general on his happy return. In the meantime, we arrived and dropped anchor in the harbor, and we saw coming towards us in their small boats all the town's authorities and many of the town's belle dames to congratulate the general on his happy return. We did not stay in quarantine, as is usually done. The general disembarked 1 hour after his arrival in the harbor, afterwards stopped at the house where he was born. I disembarked only in the evening for my arrival in the town. The general inquired of me how I found his homeland. I said to him, "Very much. It is a good land," he said. "This is nothing. When we arrive in Paris, it will be another thing." Well, on our arrival in Corsica, they were harvesting the grapes. There was no lack of grapes, nor beautiful figs. It was a treat for us, because in Egypt we had none of that. And all in the house where we lived, there were several pretty women who showed a great deal of kindness to me as I was a stranger. But what caused me more trouble was Mr. Fisher's chatter, who had told the general and General Berthier that I had courted several of those ladies, and that I had given 25 piastres. We embarked again in the frigate, departing for Toulon. But the weather was so bad, we were obliged to turn back to Corsica, and we stayed a whole day there, and we departed the day after for Toulon. On the way, the general and General Berthier started laughing when they saw me, saying, "What? You are slyer than we are. You have already had women in France, and as for us, we have not had any of them yet." I said to them, "I would like to know who has told you this, because I could then assure you it is a lie. I had nothing and did nothing." And they said to me, "It is Fisher who said it." But I was extremely furious with that villainous man for having told lies about me. I was so angry that I wanted to thrash him. When we were some leagues from Toulon, we spotted several English ships, which were blocking our passage. Admiral Gontiome, who commanded the frigates, put the 2 frigates in defense and put a cutter on the sea. And attached with a rope behind the frigate in case of need for the general, the English, though still a good distance from us, fired some cannon shots. Admiral Gontiome saw that there was no means of reaching Toulon, and we left the English on the route to Toulon, and we took the one for Fréjus in Provence, which we were not highly far from because we could see the coasts. Some hours later, we arrived in the harbor at Fréjus. The English came up very close to us and fired cannon shots at us, but that did us no harm, because the coastal batteries protected us. Without delay, the general sent Monsieur Duroc ashore to warn the town's authorities that General Bonaparte was arriving. After that, the coastal batteries fired several cannon shots on our arrival, and the 2 frigates replied with salvos of 50 cannon shots. Later, we all disembarked, and we went on foot to the town, which was a short quarter of a league away. We arrived there very early. The general received all the town's authorities, and then ordered his dinner. Usually it takes 45 days of quarantine without being able to go ashore, but the general did not want to remain for such a long time, and so we departed the same night for Paris. And the troops who were with us after we'd arrived in the town of Fréjus, General Berthier said to me, "Roustam, lend me your saber. I will return it to you on our arrival in Paris." And I did not wish to refuse him, because I had another and my dagger, which the general had given me in the Egyptian desert, with a pair of pistols that I had carried with me from Great Cairo. I had enough to defend myself with in case of need. The general was still in the salon. I went into a small room next to him to get my pistols in good condition and load them well with some large cartridges. The general passed me on his way to dinner. He noticed that I was very busy with my pistols. He said to me, "What are you doing here?" "I'm loading my pistols in case they're needed." He said to me, "We are not in Arabia at present. We have no need of all those precautions." And I left my pistols as they were. The general departed that evening for Paris with Monsieur Duroc and General Berthier, and I departed during the night with several members of the household and the general's baggage. Also traveling with us was a gentleman from Fréjus with his wife, who was greatly pretty. He was going as far as Aix-en-Provence. We traveled all through the night, and the next day around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we came within 6 leagues of Aix-en-Provence. It was there when we were attacked by 30 brigands. For this man with his wife who were traveling with us was a terrible sight. The husband was tied to his carriage, and everything was entirely pillaged. But they were not content with all that. They stripped the poor woman all bare. She had only a single shift on her body. They believed that she had hidden some diamond on her, being as she was a jeweler. After that, the brigands came to our carriage, which was loaded with General Bonaparte's baggage. A gentleman who was with us, he said to them, "Gentlemen, do not touch his carriage, because it belongs to General Bonaparte." They fired at him. He fell to the ground and was almost dead. I had my dagger on me. I wanted to stab him, but Messieurs Danger and Gallon prevented me, saying, "If we show any resistance, we are lost." These gentlemen, they were saying this to me in Arabic, and the others did not understand any of it. After that, they broke open all the chests and took all the general's possessions and all his silverware, marked with a B on it. After that, they came to me. I had nearly 6,000 francs in my belt, in both gold and silver. They did not even take the time to undo my belt. They cut it from me with a knife. My dagger was in my deep pocket. They did not take that. I was not worried by that, because it was a souvenir from the general, which he'd given to me in the Egyptian desert. One of the brigands came up to me. He said to me, "Ain't you a Mameluke?" I said yes to him, because I spoke a little French. He answered me, "You come to eat the bread of France. We will make you spit it out through your nose, or we will make you vomit it up." To this I replied nothing to them, and they left me untouched. After that, they departed, all 30 of them well armed like regular troops, into the mountains. The unfortunate man was all this time tied to his carriage, his wife in her shift, weeping like a Magdalene. As the brigands had departed, we untied this poor man from his carriage. Truly, it was a terrible sight. This poor man threw himself into the arms of his wife. He was tearing out his side whiskers, his hair. The blood flowed down his face on seeing his wife so maltreated. Later, we departed for Aix-en-Provence and arrived that evening in the town without money to go on to Paris, even to eat. The following day, the town's authorities held a council about the losses which we had suffered, and they gathered all the troops who were garrisoned in that city. They were sent into the mountains after the brigands, but they did nothing and found nothing. We were fed at the town's expense because none of us had any money. I still had my cashmere shawl with me. I wanted not to sell it until otherwise advised. I was still waiting for the answer to the letter which I had written to the general. On my arrival in Aix-en-Provence, I communicated to him that I have been attacked by 30 French Arabs, and they have taken everything, including all your silverware. I have no money to make my journey nor to eat. When we were on the frigate, you had the kindness enough to give me money, but that the French Arabs have taken it from me. When we were in the town of Fréjus, you said to me, "You do not need your pistols, because in France there are no Arabs. But I can assure you, my general, there were 30 of them at the same time. If I had my pistols loaded, I would have killed some of them. But against such forces here is no resistance. I was alone against 30 Arabs." The third day that we were in Aix, I was at the door of the inn, which gave onto a wide promenade, when I spotted one of our brigands who was passing a sack on his back, limping on the wide promenade. I said to the one named Hébert, who was with me, "Here is a thief who is passing by. I am certain he is one of them." He said to me, "I do not believe so, because it seems to me he's a soldier." I said to him, "I am going to arrest him, and I shall take him to the council. They will have him interrogated." I ran after him myself. I said to him, "Come with me. I have something to say to you." And I took him to the council where all the town's authorities were. They interrogated him a great deal. He answered the judge that it was not him who was with the brigands, but that he had been given a few trinkets against his will. His sack was untied, which contained 6 pieces of silver cutlery marked B, which belonged to my general, 3 ladies' rings, with a large muslin shawl, which belonged to that poor woman who was with us. He was tried the same day and shot the following day. We were told that General Murat had to pass through the town On the 4th day, I presented myself at the post where the horses awaited his arrival. I presented myself at his carriage door. I related to him all the misfortunes that had happened to us. He gave me 100 louis for my journey. The same evening, I took the post coach with Messieurs d'Angers, Gaillon, and Hébert to Paris. We arrived in Lyon and stayed over. I departed by the road over the Tarare mountain, which is very high, but not so much as Mount Caucasus. When we arrived at the gate of Paris, we were stopped there so our papers could be inspected. These gentlemen had papers, but I myself had nothing. I said to them, I'm going to General Bonaparte's. Papers will be given you if you have need of them. And so we were allowed to go through. I arrived at Rue Chantereine at the general's house. He asked for me immediately on my arrival. He laughed extremely heartily when he saw me. He said to me, well, Roustam, so you have met French Arabs. I said to him, yes, I did. However, you said to me that there are no Bedouins in France. Me! I believe that there are some of them in every land. He said to me, oh, but no, I shall end that soon. I do not want to have in France Arabs. I said to him, I believe that will be a little difficult. After that, he presented me to his wife. I kissed her hand in the Egyptian fashion. She received me with kindness. The same evening, she took me in her carriage to the Théâtre Italien, and she ordered me to be given a pretty room and a good bed. Some days after my arrival, I had the fever for 4 days. She came to see me every day. She had me provided with good and pretty blankets to keep me warm. Nothing was ever said to the other Mameluke who was with me. After that, they had us dressed in completely new uniforms. Some days later, I saw everyone running about the house and weeping. I did not know why. I went into the salon and saw this good Madame Bonaparte on a canapé, surrounded by a great deal of people. She was unconscious. I asked several people, what is happening here? Everyone is weeping. Why is that? They said to me, the general has been to promenade with Monsieur de Rock around Paris. They are saying that both of them have been assassinated. I found myself, therefore, in a terrible state. I was weeping like an unfortunate person. But some hours later, I saw the general arrive, riding at a great gallop in the middle of the courtyard. And everyone was happy at his arrival. For my part, I was the happiest of men. It appeared that he had been at St. Cloud to chase out the Directory, which was holding the council in the orangerie of St. Cloud. He had taken a company of grenadiers and entered the hall and thrown everyone out. There was one of them who wanted to stab the general with his dagger. 2 grenadiers parried the strike, but Madame Bonaparte gave them each one a diamond ring and the rank of officer as a reward for having saved her husband. A month later, we moved to the Luxembourg Palace because the Rue de Chantereine house was too small. After he was named consul, at that moment, General Murat was courting the general's sister, who was married a few days later. General Murat requested me several times to come to his house. He showed me his wife, saying to me, what do you think, Roustam? Is my wife very pretty? It was true, too. She was greatly pretty and very amiable. She even presented me with a little souvenir ring. At that moment, Monsieur Eugène was still sous-lieutenant in the consul's guides who were being organized. Monsieur Barbanegre was colonel. The general went to promenade every day in a barouche through the boulevards. He gave a good horse so that I could accompany him everywhere. One day when we were on our promenade, Monsieur Lavigne, his piqueur, had mounted my horse, and he had given me another which I was riding that day. But the general noticed that I was not riding my own horse, and he stopped his carriage. He said to me, well, Roustam, that is not the mare I gave you. I said to him, no, my general, it was Lavigne who was riding her today. He was positioned at the head of the barouche. He made him come to the side of him, who was on my mare, and scolded him a great deal for riding my horse. If he rides her another time again, he would throw him out. After that, Lavinia dismounted, and I mounted my good and pretty mare. There was no trotter like her in Paris. A month later, the Tuileries Palace was made ready for the consul. When the furnishing was finished, the consul went into a great procession with me on horseback at the side of his carriage and made his entrance to the palace with great ceremony. After that, he was named consul for life. Some days later, I was riding on a promenade with Monsieur Lavinia. I had a young horse, a little frisky, when passing by the Pont Royal to go to the Bois de Boulogne. My horse did not want to go forward. I spurred his 2 flanks, and he set off at a great gallop. Unfortunately, the cobblestones were greatly bad. It was very hot, so that my horse lost control of its 4 legs. I tugged so hard on the bridle and the bradoon that all was snapped in my hands. But there was no longer means of controlling my horse. He fell to the ground, threw me 15 feet from him, his head, his chest, all ripped apart. The blood flowed everywhere. That poor beast was ill for a month. I wanted to get up, but my strength failed me, and I could not move my legs. I had on Mameluke great sarrau and trousers in the French style, extremely tight, undershorts and a pair of boots. Everything was ripped apart. Pieces of flesh from my legs lay on the ground. Many of the bourgeoisie came, including Lavinia, to my aid. They put me in a carriage without consciousness, and I was taken to the Tuileries Palace. Monsieur Suy, surgeon of the guard, was sent for without delay, who bled me 5 times and put boards to my legs, and, tied with ropes. I kept those boards for 20 days. The consul scolded Lavinia a great deal for giving me a young and frisky horse. He was extremely angry over the accident that had happened to me. He sent me his doctor every day for news of me. My wound was not yet healed when I learned the consul was going to war. I wanted to see the consul, but the doctor did not want me to walk. One day about 6 o'clock in the evening, I was to see the consul after his dinner. He said to me, "There you are. How did you let yourself fall from that horse?" I said to him, "It is not my fault. It seems to me that the horses of Arabia are better than those of France." And he said to me, "You have got up too soon. You will tire your leg." I said to him, "No, that I was almost healed." I said to him, "My general, I have learned that you are going to war. I hope that I will go too." He said to me, "No, my dear fellow, that cannot be. To come with me, you have to have good legs and to ride a horse." I said to him, "But I do walk well. I will be able to ride a horse too." He said to me, "Very well, walk in front of me to see if you limp." I did what I could to walk straight, but it was impossible because I suffered horribly. But he said to me, "Fear not, I shall be back soon. You will stay with my wife. She will make sure you lack for nothing." I was not happy about staying in Paris. I highly desired to go on the journey. Madame, who was at the general's side in the salon, would say to me, "What, Roustam? Why are you not content to stay with me? I would take good care of you." And so I made my farewells to the consul, and I went to my room shedding tears and having to stay in Paris sick, without relatives, friends, nor even acquaintances. Mademoiselle Hortense, Madame Bonaparte's daughter, had me come to her place extremely frequently in order to paint my portrait. My legs were still hurting. Indeed, often I wanted to fall asleep. She would say to me, "Roustam, do not fall asleep. I am going to sing you pretty verses." On another day, she gave me a snuff box designed by her. During my illness, I had Madame Coudet and her husband to care for me. Her daughter came every evening to see her mother, and sometimes she also took care of me. After my illness, I wanted to marry her. She was not young nor rich, but I wanted to make her happy. I was waiting for the consul's return to ask for permission, but several members of the household said to me, "The consul will never give you his permission for a poor choice like this." After the Battle of Marengo, the consul arrived in Paris on the ... He asked without delay for news of me. If I was completely recovered, the first duty that I did after the consul's return, it was the day of a great parade, where I rode at the consul. The marshal of the palace, de Rock, wanted not for me to ride on the day of the parade. That troubled me. I asked then for permission from the consul to stay, because Monsieur de Rock wanted to prevent me from it. He said to me, "Ride anyway. You do not have to listen to de Rock nor anyone." Later, I rode every time parades were held. I had a Turkish saddle, all embroidered in gold, and an Arabian horse for parade days, and for ordinary service, I had French horses and a hussar's saddle braided in gold. I dressed myself as I wished. I had Mameluke uniforms in velvet and in cashmere, embroidered in gold, and uniforms of blue linen and embroidered less richly. One day at the consul's lunch, I asked for permission to get married. He said to me, "But you are still too young for that. Is a young lady young and rich?" I said to him, "No, but she will be a good wife. I love her." He seemed to me that the consul had been warned about this. He said to me, No, I do not want this. You are still young, and she is not rich. She is 24 years. You are only 15 years. You will see that it cannot work." And so he refused me. I saw well this refusal was for my own good, and I was forced to tell the father and the mother, "The consul does not want me to get married. It is impossible to force him." After his daughter was told this, she was desolate at the bad news. I consoled her as best as I could. She was married a year later to a man from America. I arranged a position for her husband that same year. We stayed at Malmaison for 3 months to take the country air. The first consul wanted me to stay in Versailles at Monsieur Boutet's until I had learned well the knowledge of hunting weapons, as Malmaison is not extremely far from Versailles. I said to the first consul, "If I stay all the time in Versailles, who is it who will sleep at the door of your bedroom to guard you during the night? I would like to go there in the morning at 6 o'clock, and I will work until 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and I will come here to do my duty." He said to me, "Yes, you are right." I traveled to and fro on horseback, and over 2 months, Monsieur Boutet showed me all the things that were necessary for the hunt. When I had learned everything, Monsieur Boutet gave me a letter for the Grand Marshal, according to which I would be able to load the rifles of the first consul and his pistols. I took the letter to the Grand Marshal. He showed it to the first consul, who was satisfied. Monsieur L'Herbier also showed me over a long period how to understand telescopes and their cleaning, and I was charged with inspecting every day the first consul's telescopes and with loading his pistols on hunting days. I would carry his carbine, and I loaded the rifles still on horseback. He would always compliment me on the service that I did for him. After some time, the first consul took up his residence at the Palace of St. Cloud, and he had himself named Emperor of the French, which was a great occasion for everyone. Chapter 3. Over the 3 years I had been with the emperor, I had not been paid. I had no contract. I asked for nothing, and I was given nothing at all. The emperor did not know anything about this. I did not even have a little money to buy tobacco. I had a cashmere shawl. I preferred to sell it rather than ask for money from the emperor. However, all my acquaintances would tell me everyone everywhere believes that the emperor gives you a great deal of money. You have to ask. But I knew Monsieur Vinard very well, who was my protector and friend, who had taken me in friendship since my arrival from Egypt. He never wanted me to ask the emperor for money, saying to me, "Leave it as it is. The emperor will never leave you lacking for anything. You should stay as you are." And so I always followed his good advice, and I found myself always well with it. Despite all that, I did not have the money to cover any little expense that I needed to. I gave my shawl to a man who came to see me sometimes to sell for 15 louis, but the pig brought me 10 louis, telling me that he would bring 5 others to me in 3 days. The 3 days passed, a month passed, no response. I presented myself one day at his house. He had moved, but the doorkeeper gave me his address, which was along the passage Feydeau. I had had several letters written to him. I had never had any response. One fine day, I went in person to his place, which I had found. He gave me a very evil look, saying to me, "I do not have money to pay you. I sold your shawl 15 louis, 10 for you, 5 for me." I threatened to have him put in prison. He said to me, "I do not fear you." I said to him, "That is good. Goodbye. We shall see each other again." Sometimes someone told me that he would always dine table d'hôte at the place next to St. Martin's Gate. I certainly had its address. I presented myself there one day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to know if he was there. The bourgeois woman from the counter said to me, "You're asking for Monsieur Antoine. He is eating." I said, "That is good. I am grateful to you." And I returned to the Tuileries Palace. I sent for the grenadiers officer who was on duty and who I had known since Great Cairo. I asked him for 2 grenadiers and led them to the house where Monsieur Antoine was at dinner. I said to the servant, "Tell Monsieur Antoine to come down. There is someone who desires to speak to him." So down he came, I placed him in the hands of the grenadiers to take him to prison, but he had seen well that I meant seriously. He asked me to have him taken to his house, and he would pay me at once. And I went. He paid me, as we agreed on. And I gave 12 francs to the grenadiers to buy something to drink. A month later, the emperor came to Paris to take part in a grand parade and to stay a few days in Paris, as I always slept at his door. He asked me one day for supper at midnight. I always had his supper by me. I served it in his bed, where he slept with the empress. The emperor said to me, Roustam, are you rich? Do you have any money? I said to him, yes, sire, as long as I have the fortune to be always close by your majesty. That will be a great fortune for me. He said to me, and so, if I asked you for money, could you lend me some? I said to him, sire, I have 12 louis in my pocket. I will give you them all. What? No more than that? No, sire. He said to me, how much is your pay? Nothing, sire. I'm not complaining. I find myself happy. Indeed, how much do you earn under me? I still did not want to tell him the truth. He started to get very dissatisfied with Monsieur Fisher, who was at the head of his household. He said to me again, so tell me, how much do you earn under me? I said to him, nothing. I've asked for nothing, and they have given me nothing. What? For 2 years you have no money? I said to him, I beg your pardon, sire. Coming back from Egypt, I had a cashmere shawl. I sold it to get a little money to have tobacco and some small expenses that I need to make. After that, he immediately got angry with Mr. Fisher. He said to me, go and find Fisher. As I could not leave the emperor's door, I sent an attendant to the guard-room in search of him. When Fisher saw me, he said to me, is the emperor in good humor? Why is he asking for me at this hour? I said to him, I do not know anything, but fear not. He is in extremely good humor. And I announced Monsieur Fisher to the emperor, who received him extremely badly. He rebuked him a great deal, saying, why is not Roustam on the staff list of my household? I am surrounded by Frenchmen who serve me for their interests. Here's a man who is extremely attached to me. He has been given no pay for 2 years. And he said to him, sire, I did not want to do anything without orders. The emperor said to him, you are an imbecile. You needed to inform me. I have other things to think of than that. Go without delay and put him on the staff list of my valets de chambre. But he said nothing about the back pay for the 2 years when I received nothing. After that, I was paid 1,200 livres a year like everyone. Some years later, it was set at 2,400 livres. The emperor's household was being organized. Pages had been taken on. The comptroller Fisher said to me, Roustam, you will not serve the emperor anymore. I said to him, why is that? I have been serving him since Egypt. Is the emperor dissatisfied with me? He said to me, no. We are going to do as we did before. You will hand clean plates to the pages, who themselves will hand them to the emperor, and you will receive the dirty ones from the hands of the pages. I replied to him, no, I will not serve in that manner. If the emperor tells me why I am not serving him, I shall tell him exactly what I think. I did not serve since that time, and the emperor never spoke to me about it. The Prince of Neuchâtel had provided the emperor with a staff list for organizing a shooting hunt, but he lacked a gun bearer. The prince proposed a man as gun bearer, but the emperor did not want him, saying to the prince, that position belongs to Roustam. He has learned his craft with Boutet, and he always hunts with me. He is even a very honest man. This must be respected. But I knew nothing of all that. I only learned of it some days later. For a long time, the Prince of Neuchâtel had promised me permission to hunt in Saint-Germain. I was waiting for it all the time to have a grand rabbit hunt there. One day, the prince huntsman brought me a very large letter from the part of the prince. I thought it was my hunting permission. Not at all. It was my promotion to gun bearer. That the prince was sending me with a very amiable letter from him. The position of gun bearer rose to 2,400 livres per year. After that, I presented myself without delay to the emperor to thank him for all the kindnesses he had for me. I will do what I can to merit the kindnesses of your majesty. He said to me, Roustam, I gave you a good saber in Egypt. I do not see it. Why are you not carrying it? I said to him, sire, when we arrived in Fréjus, the Prince Berthier asked me to lend him my saber and said to me that he would give it back on my arrival in Paris, but he has not given it back to me yet. He said to me, I do not want this anymore. Go ask him for it on my behalf today. And I went to the prince and asked him for my saber on behalf of the emperor. He said to me, I do not have any saber of yours. I do not know what you're asking me for. And I returned to the house. I told the emperor that the prince had told me. The emperor sent for me a second time. He said to me, Berthier wants to keep your saber. I do not want that. Tell him, Will, on my behalf, that he is to return your saber. And I returned again the same day. Prince said to me, do you understand French? I said to him, yes, monsieur. And he said to me, very well, I have made a swap with the emperor. I have given him one of my sabers for yours. I said to him, yes, I understand very well for the moment. And I told all this to the emperor. He said to me, Berthier is a villain. But never mind. I'm going to give you one of my sabers. He requested Monsieur Hébert, his valet de chambre, for all his sabers, and he chose an excellent one of them. The blade and sheath were in damask. I thanked him well, and I carried it with me every day. Some days later, we spent several days at Malmaison. One day, at his bedtime, he said to me, Roustam, have you seen General Bessières? I said to him, no, sire, I have not seen him today. And he said to me, I have given him something for you. The next day, Marshal Bessières gave me an annual pension order of 500 livres in perpetuity, saying to me that it was from the emperor. When we returned to St. Cloud, the emperor went to walk in the orangerie. He said to me, well, Roustam, have you seen Bessières? I said to him, yes, sire, thank you. He has given me a pension order of 500 livres. He said to me, you do not know how to count. It is well more than that. I said, I beg your pardon, sir. I know well how to count. There's no more than 500 livres of pension. He said to me, that is not true. Go and find your order so I can say. The order was in my room. I went to find it. He read it through. After that, he said to me, you are right. He handed me back the order, saying to me, I am making you a pension of 900 livres. It seems to me that Bessières has kept 400 livres for himself. That is extremely bad on his part. The same day, he called for Marshal Bessières. He rebuked him a great deal for this. The marshal believed that I had gone to speak to the emperor. I did not fear him, because I was not at fault. He said to me, the marshal, one day, I've just spoken to the emperor, and you will speak presently if you wish. I said to him, Monseigneur, I have never spoken to the emperor except to thank him for all the good things that he has done for me. It was he himself who asked me for my order. I swear to you on my word of honor, I've never opened my mouth against you. 3 days later, the emperor presented me through his secretary 400 livres in pension. That therefore gave me 900 livres of income. Through all this good fortune, I never forgot my poor mother and my sister. I had written them 14 letters via Constantinople and St. Petersburg, and I never received a reply. We were one day hunting. The emperor said to me, Roustam, do you have your portrait? I said to him, yes, sire. I had it painted by Monsieur Isabey in miniature. And he said, Marshal Brune is departing today on a mission to Constantinople. You must send your portrait to your mother. I was not happy with that because the emperor had promised me several times to have my mother come to me. I said to the emperor, sire, your majesty wishes that I send my portrait to my mother, so will your majesty not have her come here? He said to me, the one does not prevent the other. Still send your portrait, and I will have her come afterwards. There was in Paris an Armenian merchant who wanted to make the journey to Tartary and to Crimea to look for my mother and my sister who I had left in that land. But she asked for a passport signed by the emperor and 3,000 francs and a carriage. I found myself forced to go to the emperor and ask for his consent. He said to me, that Armenian is asking for all these things in order to sell his merchandise. After that, he will come to tell you that he has not found your mother. As he knows the land, he can make the journey. But I will not give him anything in advance. On his return, he will bring your mother to you. If she is dead, he will bring you a certificate from the governor of the land. After that, I will pay him all the expenses of his journey and 10,000 francs indemnity. I told him all this from the emperor. He did not want to undertake the journey. After that, I still wrote several letters, and I was unable to get any news about them. I went on the campaign with the emperor, the first Austrian campaign, the Prussian and Polish campaigns, the second Austrian campaign, and the Spanish, and the campaign of Moscow and of Dresden, and that of the French interior, and 2 journeys in Italy, and that of Venice, and the journey in Holland, where I caught a fever, and where the emperor had given me a carriage from the household to take me back to Paris. 7 years. After my arrival from Egypt, I had made up my mind to be married to Duville's daughter, who was greatly pretty and belonged to an honest family and who I had known for a greatly long time. She was 16 years old. I went to see her every day, but I dare not speak of marriage. Some days before the first journey to Austria, I held a lunch for Duville, who was head valet de chambre of the Empress Josephine, and for Monsieur Le Peltier, who I knew very well through Duville, who was his friend. I held the lunch for those two people so that I could ask Duville for his daughter in marriage. After the meal, I said to Duville, "You have a pretty daughter, and I am a bachelor. If I am fortunate enough to succeed, may I ask for her in marriage?" Indeed, me and Peltier, we had talked to him a great deal so that he would not refuse me. He answered me, "I entirely keep my daughter's reputation. I cannot say yes without the emperor giving you his consent."